Hey, it's me, John Beckerman, and you are watching the Letterman Podcast with Mike Chisholm. And coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. That's your bit, right? That's your bit.
That's my bit.
I'm doing your bit.
Thank
you.
La, la, la. Welcome once again to the Letterman Podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. I'm stoked about today's guest. Oh man, this is a fun one. Eileen O'Brien. Okay, so the Cue Card Girl. There is a short documentary on YouTube, and we will link it in the Facebook group and different places. But if you go onto YouTube and you look up, I believe it's just called Cue Card Girl. I think if you look that up, you will find her. There is a documentary short made about Eileen O'Brien, and it is a fantastic little doc about her. Very, very interesting for anybody who is watching or listening to this right now. I promise you, you'll like it. Go watch it. Cue Card Girl. And at the end of the day, Eileen O'Brien has had a very interesting life that is connected with show business in different respects. The latest part of her career, and I would say the biggest part of her career, has been working with film festivals. She's in Colorado right now, but was a major part of Sundance and things like that. But before that, she had a life in television, her and her husband both, that intersected with Late Night with David Letterman. And her intersection with it has to do with being a cue card girl. Hence the name of the documentary made about her. You gotta watch it for the Christopher Reeve story. There's a Christopher Reeve story in that documentary, which we talk about a little bit in the episode here, but boy, is it worth watching just for that. It's adorable. It's an adorable story. But she worked for Kevin Kay, who was in charge of the cue cards at 30 Rock. And, so she would work on Saturday Night Live quite a bit, and that's what the documentary focuses on. But she was also Kevin Kay's go-to for a second cue card person for Late Night with David Letterman. And she was on call and would work at Late Night with David Letterman all the time. She wouldn't work with Dave as much, but she would always do work with anytime there was a B sideline event at Late Night with David Letterman that required cue cards. So a good example being whenever Calvert DeForest, whenever Larry Bud Melman did anything, Eileen was the gal holding the cue cards for Calvert. She talks about Calvert. She talks about some stories with Mero Marco. We go through a whole bunch of stuff here, and it's really cool talking to Eileen because she has this perspective in many of these situations that she was in. She was the only woman. She was the only woman on the floor of a television show, and she just knew how to kind of get by and be, one of the crew. And I really appreciate her perspective talking about, she talks so fondly of these times, and her excitement is contagious. Her enthusiasm is contagious. I'm just a really, really big fan of Eileen. We're going to have her back. I need to have some more phone conversations with her because, she worked on things like Saturday Night's Main Event back in the day. Anything that Dick Ebersol was doing, she was a part of. I just really appreciate her. I think you're going to like her too. The Letterman Podcast is absolutely thrilled to present our conversation with Eileen O'Brien. Eileen, I'm so excited to have you here today. This is any time that I can get somebody who was around in the infancy years of late night. Yeah. So we're getting you today. We're going to get your husband later on, but we're going to get you particularly today. I watched Cue Card Girl, and we're gonna post it around where we release this episode. We're gonna post Cue Card Girl, the link to it on the YouTube, the doc. What a delightful little doc about you and the adventures that you had. And this is early on in your career. I mean, you've gone on and become all part of all these film festivals and things like that. Sundance, my gosh, you've been part of some really cool stuff. But in the infancy of your career, everything from being, and I don't want to rehash the doc. People can go to that. But the idea of Christopher Reeve's assistant, and then moving on to SNL and some of the things that you did there, and
George Carlin.
George Carlin. Oh my gosh,
Never
George Carlin. And then linking up with him again,
Yeah. Crazy.
So in that though, we have a nice little pocket right here.
Yeah.
because the doc did a great job about you talking about SNL, and we've had
Yes.
Wally Ferriston on the show here, and he's done a good job talking about how cue cards kind of fell through the cracks of the different unions and things like that, and he gave us a
Oh, I
really
can
good
tell you. I
yeah.
can tell you firsthand about that for sure.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's just it's fascinating because to me, to this
Yeah.
very day, where
Yeah.
you had your office under the bleachers of
Under
SNL,
the
it's kind
bleachers.
of some of the most prime real estate in the world. Wally
It
and his
is.
team works from to this day, all these years
Yeah.
later. You were at the epicenter of that, and there's a whole bunch
Yeah.
of Letterman stuff that wasn't in the doc. And so
No,
I'm so excited to meet you today.
right.
Thank you so much for coming on the Letterman podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. And the truth is that, okay, it's a 24-minute short called Cue Card Girl.
Yep.
It started out as a 90-minute feature called the Queen Eileen, because I got crowns. Actually, I got the nickname Queen Eileen on the set of SNL because all the union guys, who are a pretty tough bunch, and this
Yep.
is the 80s, so I was
Yep.
the only woman on the floor. I just realized that the only way I could fit in was to curse a lot.
Yep.
So I always use it as an excuse. My husband said I was cursing before I started there. But anyway, I just took to it out of water in college in the early 70s. So, but basically they used to, they give me a lot of grief and I have to give them grief back. And at some point something was said, like, who do you think you are, the queen or something? I said, yeah, I'm friggin' Queen Eileen and you don't forget it, or something silly.
Yep.
So I got the nickname kind of at SNL when I was trying to hold my own with all the union guys, and well, just the crew guys, everybody on the crew. And so basically the documentary was meant to be a feature, which included a lot of Letterman stuff, but we then got sort of notes from a lot of my friends in the festival world that we should make it a short.
Mm-hmm.
So it was made by two young students. It was two of them that I gave scholarships when they were 12 years old to a program in the summer called Young Filmmakers Workshop. They started at 12. So Aiden Nelson and then Violet Dempsey, and they met actually at a program that was put together by Series Fest. Do you know about Series Fest?
I don't. What's this?
Okay.
No, I don't.
So Series Fest is a festival here in Denver. It was 10 years old this year. And I cried when they came here because it's the amalgamation of my whole career. It's a festival, because I do festivals the last 25, 30 years. I've done film festivals. That's a long story.
Yep.
And television. So it's a festival of TV pilots. It's amazing. You have to look into it.
A festival of TV pilots.
TV pilots.
Awesome.
So it's independent. It's a lot like film, like Sundance would have independent filmmakers. Series Fest has independent pilots from different people. And then they also sprinkle throughout it, people in the industry currently and pretty big names. I mean, and so they came 10 years ago, and I was working at Denver Film Festival. The Denver Film Society was the year-round name of the organization. And I was brought back in 2006 to do to be the director of membership and volunteers. In 1999, I was the producer of the festival. After I'd worked Cannes and Sundance, I came here, and then my husband's job took us back east. So we came back in 2006. So we've been here now since 6. This is the longest we've lived anywhere. We've moved 32 times in 44 years of marriage, because my husband not only was an editor, but then became the marketing person for this newfangled thing called Avid. This was in the early 90s. He worked for Avid in the early years. He worked for Bill Warner, who was the creator of Avid, and ended up getting an Oscar, a technical Oscar, because of what he came up with. But anyway, so we've traveled all over. So we came back to Denver in 2006, and when the girls 10 years ago, there's two beautiful women that put together Series Fest. When they put it together, I just cried because and they wanted to do it in Denver. So I've been a real supporter of this festival and these women who do it. And they were doing actually they did a pilot, a TV pilot. So Aiden and Violet met there, and then I went to go see them because I always follow up on my students. I started out as a school teacher, so I'm a sucker for young people. I always have had interns and volunteers that work with me and young people. So, and in fact, I've pretty much discovered through this podcasting that in a way that's what drives me. And it's funny because cue cards is the same thing. Cue cards, I always say, it's like you're practically on the set. You're everything but on the set, in that you are going through whatever the actor, character, person is going through, and you're there for them, keeping them on track, helping them, and that's what I like to do. So these two young people came to me and said, this was about 4 or 5 years ago. Oh, we're going to make a documentary about you. I went, no, you aren't. It's really a lot of work. I've made documentaries and it's like not easy, but they got it in their head and they did it. And then we played about 10 festivals. One
as
of
a
which
feature or as a short?
As a short.
As a short. Okay.
So we cut it down. And so we took the part, just, the part about SNL and me and Christopher Reeve is always a good story.
Oh, that's a great story.
And my husband and everything. So he's, as you saw, he's in the short.
Yeah.
So it's just
Superman.
he's my Superman. He is still to this day. So yeah, it's pretty groovy. And so that's what happened. And it's unfortunate because they went around the country interviewing people. They interviewed people in LA and New York that talked about, working with me and everything, but that didn't end up in the final film. So there's a lot of people that say to me, we want to see the feature. But both of them have just this year's gone to college. So Violet, who is a lot younger than Aiden, she just graduated high school. She's going to CU Denver to study to be she's a director already, but she's gonna study directing. And Aiden is leaving next month. He's older than her, but he was going to community college. He's going next month to do his last 2 years at the London Academy of Film to study editing. Because largely the way they broke it up, and I didn't have anything to do with it, I let them do their thing, because part of what I really tried hard to do was not impose all my knowledge of production on them, because I wanted it to be their film. So it kind of broke out where Violet was the shooter. She shot pretty much everything, and she was the director. And then Aiden he also directed, but mostly he did the editing. They communicated and of course, coordinated.
Yeah, but they had their roles and they complemented each other. Yeah.
And they did a great job. And so I can't believe what a nice film it is. It's really a nice film. It's not like earth-shattering. But 2, it's just brought me such joy, and situations like this where I've been wanting to tell these stories in public, but I really didn't say anything until recently, because I would get asked all through my career, talk about SNL, and I thought, no, I'm not going to do that, because I learned from Al Siegel was my partner in crime. He also did Letterman on occasions, but he was mostly SNL, and he's in all the books. And I watched when the first book was 2 guys, I think from the New York Times, did a book about SNL. I can't remember. There's been a couple now, but they came to interview him, and he was a real, like, bon vivant type of storyteller from Queens, New York, right? Loved him. He was like a sort of second father to me. And he was asked about specific stories that he told for years, and he just clammed up. He would be, what do you think about, Raquel Welch, which was a torture to him. And he said, a wonderful actress and a consummate professional. And I said to him afterwards, what are you doing? Why don't you tell your stories? And he said, Eileen, we're just cogs in this wheel. Don't you ever think that you're more important than this show or the people on it, or, you've got to be careful. So I've been really holding back I always tell them at dinner, my husband always said that we lived on his salary and dined out on my stories, because I was, constantly every day was a different, I looked at the episodes of Letterman and you forget that you did it every day. Well, now I didn't do it every day. So
this is what I want to know. So yeah, let's set the table a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Because you and your husband both, like, I mean, when you tell me your husband was with Abbott and all this stuff, but then you go back and you look at the cameraman and all the other things that he did, yourself as well. You get into and folks who want to watch it, please watch Q Car Girl. We will link to it. But you get to the point where you've done a few different odds and end jobs. You kind of got pulled out of teaching and thrown into television production, kind of ass backwards, and
absolutely
start getting all this experience. And suddenly you get a call from a guy named Kevin Kay. And we know who Kevin Kay is and who Kevin Kay has gone on to become. It's crazy. But you get this call from Kevin, and he's the guy who's running the cue cards for 30 Rock.
Right.
And you get this opportunity. And your husband ends up working in 30 Rock as well. So let's start there. What year are we talking here that you're both working in 30 Rock? And what are you doing?
We're both together. He was there, I think 81, 82, I'm not sure, but earlier than me as an editor.
Yep.
And then he was asked to be a manager of post-production. Okay. Now, when I came in, it was 83. I had just finished working for George Carlin on Carlin and Carnegie.
Yep.
That was totally a fluke. Again, my whole career has just been, I was joking with somebody the other day. I'd go, oh, I could do that. I'll try that. And see, when I was a crew person in South Carolina, ETV, which is where Chuck and I met, we could do anything. So we did everything. So a friend of mine, Jerry Gepner, who went on to become the president of Fox Sports, you know how you watch a puck and there's all this overlay and chyron and, what do you call it? A blue screen, green screen stuff. That's all Jerry Gepner created all.
Okay.
But before he did that, he was working as a technical director down in New York City, downtown somewhere. And I went to a party at his house because I had done 4 or 5 specials through my connection with Emile Ardolino. Emile Ardolino was the director of Dance in America and went on to direct Dirty Dancing. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
And he would come to South Carolina, and we were really well matched because he was a New Yorker and I was a New Yorker, and I knew where to get the best, pastrami sandwich. And so we got really close. And the first work I got was through Emile in New York. And then that led to other sort of freelance gigs. And the last gig before I started at SNL, I worked for George Carlin, who, as I've said to you in writing, the only person that was a better boss than Letterman was George, but they're pretty neck and neck. Okay. Yep. So George was just amazing person, and was not only just that, he was the real deal. If he committed to you, he committed to you in, sincerely. There was no phoniness. And in fact, the only person, when I moved back from Cannes, where I worked the Cannes Film Festival for 5 years, so we moved back to the States, right, in like 99, 2000. The only person that returned my phone call was George.
No kidding.
Yeah, and George so all these people that I'd held cards for that said to me, if you ever need anything, Eileen, just call me, right? George called me himself.
He meant it. Oh.
Himself. So I pick up the phone and he's like, Eileen, it's George. And I go, George who? Because it's like, and he goes, George Carlin, you called me. What do you need? So anyway, so I worked for George. And then right after that is when I went to the party at Jerry Gepner's house.
Yep.
And Jerry said, his wife said to me, what do you want to do? Because the work was just disappearing. So, because all the cable networks started with all the arts.
Yep.
They started their own arts network and they died within a year. Just died. They started in the early 80s and then they were dead by 83.
Yep.
So all the work that I had previously done was drying up. So I said, I love being on the floor. And she said to me, Jerry's wife at the time, said, well, what about the words that roll? I said, oh, teleprompter. I've done teleprompter. I did it for years when I was the camera woman, when I was a crew person. She said, well, Jerry hires people to do that. So next day so Jerry says, I'll connect you, right? So I get this phone call on the cassette machine where I have Kevin Kay going, Eileen, this is Kevin Kay with Video Q. I heard you want to do cue cards on SNL. I had to disconnect. I was like, I thought there was somebody at home back in South Carolina punking me, see, because they call me every couple of weeks and go, are you a star yet? You know,
oh no,
a friendly punking.
The crabs in the bucket.
Right. So I didn't call him back. And then he called again. He called 3 times. And finally, the third one was, do you want to interview for this job or don't you? So I call him back and I go, who the hell are you? And why are you calling me? So he said, you know, Jerry Gepner gave me your name. I said, what? That was for teleprompter. He said, oh, we do teleprompter in the summer to make money when SNL's in hiatus. So that's where the connection came. And he said, we're starting next week. We're doing pre-tapes with Eddie Murphy. The first time I ever did it. And I go, you know, so I go from sitting in my apartment miserable to sitting in the bleachers right above where I worked for all those years. And it's like a typical 20-year-old. I tried to talk my way out of the job. You know, I can't draw I can't write good. Yeah. He's like, we can teach you that. So by the next week, I was holding cards for Eddie. Now, when he hired me, he said, we also have an opportunity for you to work on Letterman, because Letterman was, I think it's 2 years in. I think it was the second. I think he started 81, I want to say.
80, now, beginning 82, yeah.
So late night started then, not late show. Okay.
The morning show, the late night started in 82, but the morning show, and your husband was familiar with that. When we have him on, we're going to talk to him about that. So you were there early on. You were there, you know, a year and a half in or whatever.
Right. So basically he said to me, so if you want, what you can do is be on call from Monday through Thursday for Letterman, and then do SNL from Thursday to Saturday. So I had a full 7-day run pretty much. And I said, sure, you know, I'm freelance. And I wasn't a big fan of having to always find the next job. I really, because I'd worked at a PBS network, I was used to that sort of, you know, routine and having people the same people. I really like seeing the same people every day. So when he offered me that, it was perfect because I really wanted to have a home base, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the way I did it from 83 to 87. I did. So I was on call Monday through Thursday. And basically Kevin would call me in the morning because Kevin was that whole time. Kevin was Dave's guy. You know, he was his main dude. And also, you know, so you know that Kevin Kay's uncle, Donnie Kay, was the cue card guy for Carson. And when Carson moved from New York to Burbank is when he handed off the New York part of the company to Kevin. And so Kevin became the head of the company too. So, and we basically, what we did was we did Letterman, as I said, during the week. And then we did SNL all weekend long. And then we would do all kinds of specials because in those days we held what they call award size cue cards. I did the first MTV awards. I did, you know, you name it.
No kidding. Oh my gosh.
Lots of award shows. Yeah. So we did specials.
Did Eddie Murphy host that one?
No, Eddie the first MTV award was Bette Midler and Dan Aykroyd. They were the first.
Oh,
but then Eddie did the second one and made me crazy because he and I were really close from the years at SNL. And he didn't realize that the awards cards, they're these giant cards in the middle of the theater. Their letters are like this big, and you have to practice those. And he wouldn't practice because Eddie was so genius that he never practiced, So, but we got through it. But I did do the one with Eddie. It was pretty wild. And in fact, if you ever see a version of it, he's yelling at me from the stage. He's like, "Hey, Eileen, cue card girl," basically, because he's like having trouble, not big trouble, because Eddie never has big trouble. He's just too genius,
too mellow.
But it was weird because what happened was Kevin would call me like sometimes Sunday night because he'd know, or Monday morning because as we would go live to tape at 5:30. So but the clocks all said 12:30. They were all like as if we were live.
As if it was live. Yeah, I want to ask you about that because you're one of the few people who you get the experience of both SNL and Letterman, and there are some people who say that Letterman almost sometimes felt more live than SNL did.
It did
because of the pacing of how they did it, and
they never. I mean, when I was there, which was just those 5 years, I don't think there was more than 2 times where we stopped the tape for Letterman. I mean, he was really committed to it being live. So, as if, as they say, live to tape. And
but the stuff that goes wrong stays in the show. Like that
stays in the show. And unless there was a major technical breakdown, he was not going to allow it because he really wanted the pace to be live. So when you watch it, you can feel that in the sense that it's just, you just keep on going no matter what.
Well, and it became the culture of the show. Like it literally is the personality of the show that people like me and so many others fell in love with. And that's kind of that's I think one of the secret ingredients of the secret sauce to making it feel like it was a club and that everyone was allowed to be in the club because the crew was also a part of the show and they would be highlighted sometimes for comedic reference from a writer, but sometimes when things messed up, it's like, okay, let's now dive into this and get meta about it, which is genius. One of the genius things about that show.
Well, and Dave was also, he's just an absolutely, I think, one of the most wonderful, kind men I've ever worked for in my career. Seriously. He's one of the few people that ever stuck up for me when other people abused me. When there was guests, once or twice, there were guests who were abusive, and he just came right out and said, "Why are you doing that? She's, don't treat her that way." And that was so rare because I always joke that, how there's that joke of like, first you beat your wife, then you beat your children. And when all else is said and done, you kick the dog, right? That's like, I know it's a very badly, it's a joke that no longer is, appropriate.
No. But it's,
but I always said cue cards were the dogs of the industry. So when you couldn't blame anybody else or couldn't, like take it out on, then you take it out on the cue card person, and that would happen every now and then. And he would not let it, he would not allow it. He was just all in, where he would just say, "Hey, stop that," and it was really amazing because there was, he also, had a very large woman team, he had.
Oh, absolutely.
Jude Brennan and Barbara Gaines were both PAs when I worked there. So they were bringing me copy. And so basically what happened is that Dave understood the power of the crew. And see, if you put someone on camera, they get paid to be an actor. And I forgot, I meant to tell you, most of my work that I did, not most, but a big heavy percentage was I did Larry Bud Melman's remotes. I did almost all of those. And Meryl Marco and I were, not tight, but I really loved working for her where, Kevin would call me and say, "Hey, will you go to the Empire State Building? You're handing out, wet towels." And Meryl Marco's the producer. And so I worked for Meryl a lot.
Okay.
And,
so I gotta jump in here right now. Now I've had Paul on the show and Steve O'Donnell and some of these amazing icons within the Letterman mythos. I
Right.
haven't had Dave and I haven't had Meryl on.
Right.
And people ask me every once in a while who I'd
Mhm.
rather have on, and I'll tell you this, it's a toss up.
It's a tough, yeah,
I have
yeah.
so much respect for Meryl Marco.
Oh my
And if
God.
you have any Meryl stories, I
Yeah.
would love to hear them. And the other thing too that I want to throw out there for you, but also for our audience, are you familiar with Substack?
No, I'm not. No.
Okay, so Substack is a platform that people can go and they can write on it, and they can put their writings
Oh,
up, and they
so
can
it's like a blog, or I don't.
it's a sort of a blog. It's
Okay.
sort of a blog, yeah, but it's a combination of a blog, and there's Patreon there if people want to subscribe
Oh, I
to their
see.
to these people and support them and whatnot. And it's a place that they can sound off and they can build an audience, and
I see.
it's a fantastic platform. Meryl
I see.
Marco's Substack is brilliant. It's so
Wow.
great. The stuff that she writes is hilarious. And if you'll remember, she's also a visual artist.
She's just
And so she does like almost like graphic novel type things and
Oh,
mixed media and whatnot. She is just, so I highly recommend it. If
oh,
yeah, so that's I promise you,
oh,
just in getting to know you this short little
okay.
week here, I
Oh,
give just giving you a gift. You're really gonna enjoy it a lot.
oh,
So, but if
that's
you have
so
any
great.
Meryl stories, I want to hear them.
Well, so Meryl, what I try to explain in all of these interviews, you know, it's really hard for a current audience to even understand that you don't know who anybody is or what's going on, because there's no social media. There's nothing,
Yeah.
there's not even, I mean, I always joke, but the only thing you really had was to read, because you're in New York as opposed to LA, right?
Yeah.
The LA had, of course, Variety and all that, which we had, but it's not the same. So we had Page Six in, the New York News,
Yeah.
and you'd read Page Six because there it would say, Dave is doing this, or, but in general, there was no information. So when I was at SNL, basically all those years was when they were every year talking about taking this sucker down,
Absolutely. Yeah, you were
which
there during the dark times.
I had no idea. I just was going along to get along. And so when I met Meryl, I met Meryl the first time I held cards for Larry Budd, Calvin DeForest.
Calvert, yeah.
Calvert, yeah, right.
Yeah.
And bless his little heart. Oh my God. I gotta tell you, it was all real. There was nothing fake. He was, and so I was kind of a therapist in that he was, every time you came to him, he would go, I'm gonna screw it up and Dave's gonna be mad. And then I kept going, honey, he likes when you screw up. No, and then you really felt like, why are you saying that to this poor man? But Meryl found him, the story at NYU. Well,
yeah, it was actually Steve Weiner and Carl Tiedemann actually were the guys who found. We had Steve Weiner, good friend of mine, and I actually have a copy, and we're gonna figure out how we can distribute it. Put it up here. I have a really good copy of King of the Z's, which was the New York film. NYU film that they made,
yeah.
That Calvert was in it, and Steve wrote for the show for the first year, and they had said to him in the preparation for late night, they said, hey, well, we should get a guy like the guy in your film, and he's like, let's bring the guy in my film, and he introduced them to Meryl and to Dave. So Steve Weiner, and I can make that connect. I think you and Steve would actually, you passed like ships in the night. It feels like the moment he left is when you kind of came on. He left when Jim Downey and them started working for Letterman.
Oh, gotcha.
That's when Steve left. So I want to connect you two, because I think you two would probably have some really neat
who knows,
cross sections. Yeah, but anyway, so Meryl and Calvert.
So
yeah.
Meryl and Calvert so Kevin would call me up in the mornings and say, come to the studio, because the only reason you'd need me as a second is what we call it.
Yep.
Is that the way cards work is that it's a proscenium situation where one set is one person looking over that way and the other set is on the other side. That's even the way we did SNL,
Yep.
two big sets.
Yep.
And so every now and then it was often Paul, doing his thing. And so you'd hold cards for Paul or somebody else on the crew that you would have a back and forth. So you needed a second set of cards. So that's when I was called in. So anytime there's a sketch It's
Mhm.
almost always that it's me or one of the other guys. There's 3 or 4 other people at the time that are also available if it didn't work out, for
Did you
me.
do a lot of
But
Chris
almost,
Elliott stuff?
yeah, I worked with Chris a lot. Yeah, a
Oh
whole lot.
man, see,
Yeah,
that's the other one.
yeah,
That's the
yeah,
other one. That's
yeah.
Chris, very, very, very sweet guy, very
Uh,
supportive of what we're doing here. Might come on the show at some point,
oh, okay.
but very kind of, really, really, really standoffish about what he did in the past, that
Yeah,
sort of a thing. But
well,
he is just a genius. We
I get
adore
it.
Chris Elliott.
I get it because they're protecting, that I don't know what you'd call it, that layer of where you're an artist, and
Yeah.
I feel like cue cards is its own art, really. And I have to say that when I sat down the first time with Al, okay, and he started to tell me how we do it, because you have in your head, oh, how hard is this? You just write it on a card. It is so more complicated than that.
Absolutely.
And the first couple of weeks, I went home and said to my husband, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, you have to plan ahead, and you have to know whether to write big cards or small cards and where to hold them. And it was just this whole process, right, of learning that. But he was so wonderful to me. And Al was just, if it wasn't for Al, I would have failed, because he wasn't a sexist at all, which of course in the 80s it was very easy. He was just a warm, generous man. I was kind of like his kind of, shiksa daughter,
Yep.
pretend daughter, and we ended up being very, very close. And it was a lot to do with the fact that he never talked down to me, he just walked me through things. So I started where I just couldn't do a lot of things because I didn't know how to do them. But then
Yeah.
within a year, I was right there because of Al, he was great. So, but the thing is with Letterman, Kevin was his full-time guy, right?
Absolutely.
And,
Yep.
and Kevin was the one who knew how he liked things. Everybody, as you know, does it differently.
Yep.
Carson laid his cards down in front of the set, right?
Yeah.
And read them
All
across.
in a row. Yep.
All in a row, and Letterman, I don't know if he was the first, but one of the first to turn the card on the side and not do the full joke, but just write, bits and pieces of each joke.
Yeah.
And so Dave was really committed to Kevin and vice versa, because he knew him,
Yeah, you get the shorthand,
Right.
the trust, all of that stuff.
I only did that like twice. I
Yep.
only did the actual cards for Dave twice, maybe.
Okay. I want to hear about that. Was that nerve-wracking? Was
Oh
that
my God.
like
Yeah,
okay.
I was ready to commit suicide, really. So
Okay.
I was just like, oh my God, but and that was something happened. I can't remember for Kevin, he had to get away, but basically I always just did second. I always did second.
Okay,
But
well, I got to go back and I got to ask about this a little bit because
Okay.
it's fascinating to me.
Okay.
So you're already an accepted member of the crew on the floor. That trust is built, and not an easy thing, and not everybody
No.
gets that trust. Sometimes people show up and they're on the floor for 30 minutes and then they never get back on the floor again. Like, even though, crews swap between all the different productions in 30 Rock, but if you don't, if you do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing, whether it's inadvertent or not, sometimes you're not accepted into the organism that is that floor crew. So
Right.
you already at this point were accepted. You were accepted member there. But Kevin, for whatever reason, can't be there to do cue cards for the primary position for Dave.
Right.
And so you're there, and you're coming in to do it. Dave is very known to try people a little bit sometimes when they're doing something for the first time. He throws it out, makes note of it or does something to kind of mess it up or whatever. The staff have come on and talked about if they were in the audience to answer a question. And they had a little biography made up. He would try and ask them details about the biography and try them.
Yeah.
Did he do that either time when you did that with the cue
No,
cards?
never.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Because it's a real difference between an artistic decision and a technical decision.
Okay.
So people would say to me all the time, well, hey, for Cheap Thrills, why don't you throw in a bad word? Or, this was mostly SNL and stuff. And I'd say, wow, you really don't get how this business works. And how it works is you do what you do, and it's this little part, and you do it better than anybody, because if you don't do it better than everybody, there's going to be someone to take your position. That's the thing, is that different than having a union, because we weren't unionized. So you could be fired at any minute, And so what you also realize is that it is such a, this is a community effort, that, this is not an art you can do in the back of your, garage by yourself. So, although, people have tried to do that to the king of comedy, etc. So basically,
hey, what are we doing here? What
right.
It's not a garage, it's a basement, damn it. Anyway.
You technically, everyone knows that you don't fuck that up. I'm sorry. You just don't mess with that. And
absolutely.
Dave did that. Now, if I was on camera and he was doing a back and forth with me, which I did a couple of times, I can't remember where I was. I was on SNL a number of times, and I think I did a couple of on camera. I can't remember, to be honest, but he would mess with you because it was comedy, Oops. Oh goodness.
No, we're good. I'm good.
Somebody, I got a New York number that keeps calling me, and I don't know what the heck it is. I kept my New York 916.
Probably 30 Rock.
Yeah.
They want you back.
I don't know. And anyway, we'll just let it go its way, because I'm afraid to mess with this.
It hasn't changed at all. I've seen everything here, so we're good.
Great.
We're good.
Okay. So, I could see, you could see that all the time, because see, Dave's comedy is totally contingent on there being no bottom floor, base, you don't know what's going to happen. That's the whole, what happened with Cher,
Absolutely.
Cher said, I don't want to come on because I don't know what you're going to say to me. Well, she was right, in a way. But on the other hand, it made for really, really unusual comedy, not your average comedy, not your pa-dum-bum kind of comedy. So everybody was always, on edge, which is like, we go back to Larry Bud Melman. The thing that worked there is that poor Calvert, couldn't help himself but screw up, see, because truthfully, the man was not born to be on camera, He was an absolutely lovely person, but he was just terrified from start to finish, shaking. He would shake all the time. And I would say to him, honey, calm down. It's okay. And, like I said, at the beginning, I would say to him, kind of like, Dave likes it when you mess up. And then I realized that really upset him. So I would stop saying that. I would just say, you're going to do great. He's going to love you. I don't know why you're upset. How many times have we gone through this? You're going to be fine. Because he would come to me every single time, just shaking. Literally physically shaking, going, I hope I don't make a mistake. And I said, well, don't worry, we're here. We're gonna, And Meryl was, of course, comic genius. And she knew that what Dave loved was that kind of, I don't belong here person.
Absolutely.
So she never in any way, put him down or anything, but she wasn't going to be his therapist either. We both were there kind of just very carefully saying, it's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. But knowing that actually we didn't really, in the end, you didn't want it to be okay.
The intangible.
You wanted him to hold hold the toast or whatever he was. Oh my God. They made him do such crazy things. And I did a lot of them with him. I mean, he was just a really, really lovely man. And you could tell, though, towards the end when I left in '87, that he had started to get a little more confident. And I heard from then on out that, when they moved over, they really didn't take him. I want to, when he went to CBS, I don't remember, was Larry on? I don't think he was.
Well,
maybe a little bit.
He became Calvert DeForest because the NBC folk called Larry Bud Melman Intellectual Property, which is hilarious to me.
Oh,
So,
okay. That
so
makes
just
sense.
like the very first episode of Late Night, when it's Calvert, that's the first image you see.
Yeah.
On the CBS show, the first image you see is the CBS eye. The middle drops out, and Calvert's there. He says, "This is
Oh,
CBS." So yes, and they started calling him Calvert, and they definitely used him. There's actually, if you want to see one of the later things that he did before he passed,
yeah.
where there's a full length thing, he was on the Late Late Show with Tom Snyder. And
Oh,
there's he had a segment anyway. I don't know if it was the full show dedicated to him. I feel like it was
huh.
somebody else on there as well. But
Wow.
Calvert actually was on an episode
Oh,
of Late Late Show and talked
cool.
about that. That was during the CBS years,
I
and
see.
whatnot.
Okay.
But you're
Yeah.
right. They certainly, because the tone of the show, because it turned 11:30. Turned
Yeah.
to the 11:30 show. The tone of the show changed, and
Yeah.
they didn't do as much zany. They had to kind of make it a little bit more like Johnny's Tonight Show, even though it still
Yes.
had Letterman's flair to it.
Yes. Yes.
And Calvert, I think, probably had his screen time cut because of that. I would venture that that's the case. I haven't really heard it that explicitly yet. I could probably ask Morty that question and
Oh,
probably get that
Morty,
answer.
have you talked to Morty?
He's a friend. He's a friend.
Oh,
I
I love
appreciate
Morty.
Morty very, very much. He was
He's an great.
awesome guy.
He was a great producer, really great. Yeah, it was just.
Yeah, because he was the assistant when you were there, right? Because Barry
Yep.
Sad was still there when you were there,
Yep.
right?
Yep, he was. And then I want to say towards the end, maybe 86, when he went, I don't know. But there was a point where I was there when he was the producer. He was
When he took over. Yeah.
Just a short period of time. But then after I stopped doing cards, I still went back every now and then to help out and did things. I was asked after I quit at SNL, Robin Williams came back. So that was during the Dana Carvey days. And that was after me. And I got a phone call from Robin. And he said, Eileen, I can't do this without you. And I was like, what? And he said, you're the one who knows how to follow my ad-libbing and, just my whole style. And because what I would do for him is flip through cards that were script that he was never going to speak, and then just have things ready for him so that poor Davey Wilson wasn't losing his mind because he couldn't, get him to say the line that he could cut the camera to. Because that's what people don't really get about live television, is that, you're editing on the spot. So if someone changes or goes off script or off, the sheet, the call, the rundown sheet, it throws everybody off because the cameras don't know where to go, that kind of thing. And so with Robin, I particularly enjoyed doing him, because he basically, for one thing, he was just the most genuinely beautiful human being.
Yeah.
And I just loved being there for him. Like I said, you're not on camera, but you're as close to camera as you can be. And you are living for and feeling the experience of the actor. So that for Robin, it was like kind of getting inside his skin for a little bit. So I went back for him, and I went back a couple of times when Kevin would call me and say, I need someone because I had moved on. I was actually with a few other women putting together a cable network. And I worked for Dick Cavett. I worked for Dick Cavett first. I got a job working for Dick.
Okay, this is why I love no pre-interview, because I love the reaction of that. Dick's been on the show. I adore Dick Cavett. Wow. So you went to work for Cavett.
Yeah, I was the assistant to the producers, and I was also the control room PA for the Cavett show that was on, I think Bravo or one of the cable networks. And it was weird. It was like Jimmy Brislin was on Mondays and Cavett was on Tuesdays. It was just this it was his last show. It was his last actual show. And then I went on to work for him personally. I was like an assistant producer to his executive producer, who was Judy Englander. She'd been with him since the ABC days. And I was very, very close to her. And we worked together. This was in the 80s, right? We were trying to late 80s. We were trying to put together a show for PBS that would use clips. See, so we had an author's show, we had a rock and roll show. So I was doing all of the, kind of collecting data, trying to get a hold of people.
Yep.
So like I called, Jefferson Airplane, their original drummer was at that time on the street. So I would try to track him down. I tracked him down, and then he'd call me every day. And we were really close. See, in the 80s, nobody cared about vintage.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And ABC actually burnt some of their library. I don't know if you know.
We talked to Dick about that when he was on the show here. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of Carson stuff that is lost and doesn't exist. And I mean, that's just
everybody got
travesty.
It's just, Dick was on who? Dick Cavett was.
Yeah, we had him on the show. I had him on the show, and
I love my Dick.
I adore him. It's one of the greatest
years later,
hours and a half I've ever had is talking to him. It was amazing.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
And years later, I was the artistic director at Savannah Film Festival, and he came down with his wife, Carrie. She was still alive.
Yeah.
And I spent the week with them because we showed their documentary, Tick Hall. And anyway, but a wonderful man. But I'll tell you, at that time, it was like really as if nobody appreciated the past. I don't know if it was the 80s or just, I don't know. And maybe it just takes a certain amount of time before somebody realizes. I mean, now we're so spoiled because everything is recorded.
Yep.
In those days, nothing was, recorded. And I just was brokenhearted when we couldn't do the shows only because of the music union would have charged us for every single time we played music, and we couldn't, and PBS couldn't afford the music cue rights. But I mean, I talked to Jimi Hendrix's grandfather. It was a crazy time. Janis Joplin's mother was still in charge of her, estate. And I went down to Port Arthur to talk to her. And so I tried to put that show together. And then I went on to other things. But during that time, I was still in New York. And so at any point, Kevin would call me, although Kevin had kind of moved on at that point. Kevin, as we know, you probably have talked about it.
The trajectory of that guy's career is amazing.
He went to Nickelodeon. He was Chris Elliott's manager or something. He did something with Chris for a while.
Yeah.
And then he became an executive at a number of places. But he ended up at Paramount. And I think he greenlighted Yellowstone. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
He was the president
he's touched some amazing things through the trajectory of his career. I had a phone conversation not too long ago with him, and hopefully actually after this conversation here today with you, I'm gonna give him a dingle again because he needed a little bit of time. He was they had just gotten something greenlit, I think, and so he's like, I'm gonna get really busy here.
Because I think he's independent now, right? He's doing his own thing. Well, yeah, and I contacted him a while ago because about 5 years ago, I got involved with some people, and we were going to try and turn Cue Card Girl into a sitcom. Okay, and
no kidding.
Yeah, and we reached out, but I think it was like a time when he was at Paramount still, and I don't know, who knows. Yep. But basically he was real sweet. He just said, this isn't going to work for us. And I said, okay. And we're still kind of working on that. That's not a dead idea.
No, it's genius. It's really,
we
really
feel
smart.
like 80s, I always say to people, it's kind of like 30 Rock meets Devil Wears Prada, because it's 80s. It's, me being the only woman on the floor, and, it's a real different time, and would make for interesting comedy, I think. So we'll see. I don't know. It's like, I can't stop flogging this, because the truth is it was probably the most amazing 10 years of my life. And I'm so grateful, because during that time, my husband was so supportive. He really, I made no money. I mean,
Yep.
I think it was $10 an hour. Okay.
Yep.
But I was so addicted, and at some point my husband said to me, it's like you have an addiction. When you're high, you're so high. And when you're low, you're really low. Because if anything goes wrong or, you're in the midst of turbulence, it's really hard because it's high level turbulence. Nowadays, I feel sorry for him because there's no, there was no way people could record you or, write stuff on. I mean, there was none of that.
Yep.
So the whole time I was there, I had no idea what was going on. And the same thing with Dave. So let me tell this story. So fifth anniversary, I was there, right?
Yep.
So there was a party. Okay. Yep. But it was a very Letterman-esque type of party. It was one of the oddest parties I've ever been to in my life. Because it was kind of like, we're gonna celebrate, but not too much, And he had all these odd people that day, as guests and stuff. And what was happening was all the crew guys, see, because they're all, as you know, the IATSE guys are local one, which means they started with vaudeville. Okay. These guys know about showbiz, right? They know how dangerous showbiz is. So the whole talk was, 5 years. And me, naively, I thought, well, of course we're going to keep on going. Well, no, it was like the fact that it made it to 5 years was friggin' miracle, like any show that's brand new and controversial, to say the least. And so it was this weird celebration of yay. Oh, but don't get too excited, kind of. And I remember going home and saying to Chuck, I don't really know if we were supposed to laugh or cry, it was just like, and then it realized that, it's the nature of the beast, because it took me until I worked for Dick. I was never ever on a show that got canceled. And then with Dick, we were up and running and we thought it was going to go. And then we get the call and we're canceled. And the woman who was one of the producers, Susan something, I don't know her last name. She went on to be a really famous agent in Hollywood.
Okay.
She was very showbiz oriented. And I remember she said to me, Eileen, it's showbiz. What's wrong with you? Everybody gets canceled, and I was crying. I was like, what? How did this happen? We're too good, because, and then those guys know it, see, in their hearts, because they're on a Broadway play. It lasts a month. It lasts a week. It's gone, even the most fabulous star-studded things can get canceled, right? So that was the fifth anniversary party, was kind of like, Broadway meets television, where is this going to last or not, and looking back on it, it's just incredible to me that it kept on going, because now I read and I know behind the scenes, just like with SNL during that period, people were going, I don't know, this is too controversial, this is too harsh, whatever, there's stuff that now, and that's the weirdest thing to have experienced and lived through a time when you didn't know any of that. And then all of a sudden you read about it, and you go back to it and go, oh, wow. Yeah, I guess it was that way. Like I look at SNL a lot, and talking to people and say, wow, there was kind of a tension all the time that you thought was just being live TV, but it was also, well, we could not be here tomorrow. That kind of feeling.
It's really funny. David Letterman is one of the only talk show hosts, late night talk show hosts, who got to go out on his own terms. Almost all of the other ones didn't. But it's inverted though, because his first show was canceled, and they knew what that felt like very early when the morning show got canceled, right? And so there was this drive that was there, and I've talked to a bunch of people about this idea that, like you said, you articulated that beautifully. We could always be canceled. That could happen. That was there. But then Letterman got to the point where it became so big that and then the CBS thing and all of that sort of thing, and the unique position that he was in, that he actually created a franchise that competed against the Tonight Show that had never happened before. And so he kind of got to write his own ticket at that point. But you were there during the years that he was becoming that big. You were there during the years where that popularity was becoming such that people couldn't believe it. I'll give you an example. We've talked to people on this show where they were just like, they were writers and they were writing the best that they could. And they didn't necessarily, they were sort of in a vacuum, but then the show would go to LA and they would see people lined up around the block to get tickets. And it was like a big thing that the show was coming. They're like, I guess we're popular. You were there during the epicenter of kind of that time.
Yes, for sure. And it was pretty much from the 5th anniversary on that you felt that. So it was sort of that next year or two, you started to feel the power of his presence, and of the show's presence. And up until then, it was kind of like doing a show in your garage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what I find
once again, it's not my garage, it's a basement. Anyway, continue.
But no, I mean, the thing that stunned me the most is the courage of Letterman to never, ever give up his real nature. And his nature was, that I'm going to say what I'm going to say and let the chips fall where they may. And I think one of the things he taught me in our industry was you got to be yourself, or sooner or later you get caught, And he never got caught because he was always himself. I mean, there was no phony Letterman. There was no, this is the version. Now there was during rehearsal, he wore a hat and he was he was very like almost, how would you put it? It was as if during a ballet performance and the ballerina just walks around and just points to, she did a real low key rehearsal. He never did a full out rehearsal because you could tell he wanted to save the crazy energy for the show. And so much so that a couple of times, and this is when I thought I'd get fired. The guy who was the stage manager was also into music, and he was in a choir and whatever. And he said to me, dragged me out one day because I told him that I had sung in my life. I'd been a singer. And he said, here, and he started to play the piano, and I was singing with him on the piano, with the piano. And I looked
this is Paul's
over.
Piano.
Yes, Paul's piano.
Okay,
And he's playing some song that I know, I can't remember. And I'm singing my little heart out, and I all of a sudden turned and looked over, and Dave was at his desk rehearsing. And I didn't know it, because nobody had said to me, hey, cut, stop. It was just because he was doing it so casually. And I looked over and I went, oh my God, this is it, and he never said a word, never a word. Yeah. It was just like, I just quit. And I forget the guy's name. He was there. I think he was before Biff or with Biff. He was a white dude. He was a sweet guy. And I turned to him and I went, well, we're never going to do that again. I'm never going to
20 minutes of hearing this, when it's released, Don Giller will have that name to us. It's freakish how quick Don gets that stuff. So,
really? Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Oh, yeah. He's got it all.
Meryl, but we should go back to Meryl. So,
all
right. So I just was enamored with her as a woman, in the business, because there were so few of us. Now behind the scenes, Dave had all women practically, with Jude and Barb and all those people. But in terms of your staff, your crew, otherwise there was very few women. And writers, it was hard for women writers, as you probably have heard. Letterman had more than most, but SNL, it was almost like dead in the 80s. Now there was early on, there was Annie Bates and all those, but in the 80s it got very, I used to joke that if you didn't go to Harvard and work on the Lampoon, you could not work at either one of these shows, right? And I met this girl years later. I was working at A&E in the late 80s, and I was working in production there. And she was with me. We were both temps, right? So we weren't in any high position. And she said, oh my God, I'm going to interview over at SNL for a writing job. And I was like, oh my God, good luck. I said, if you haven't if you haven't gone to Harvard and you didn't work at the Lampoon, you have no hope in hell. And she said, oh, I did both of those. And I went, oh, well, then you have a chance. Still, she didn't get it. She didn't get it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but when I said it to her, she went, oh, I've done both of those. I was like, what? Because, so anyway, it was crazy. Yeah, crazy. But Meryl just was this beaming person who just is a genius. You could just see it flying out of her head. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And all her segments that were ever done, I believe she came up with, I believe Letterman has credited her for top 10. I think also Stupid Pet Tricks, a lot of his classic comedy routines, right, came out of her mind, you know. So anytime she was going to be there, I was so thrilled. And it's a silly thing, but we did this one segment with this woman who collected snow domes. Okay, you know, like you turn upside down.
Yep.
So I came home that night, and you know, she, of course, it was Meryl's collection as well as this woman, because Meryl collected snow domes too. So just so you know, for the last 45, 50 years, I've been collecting snow domes. I mean, and it was all because, well, Meryl does it, so I should do that. You know,
that's precious.
Well, now they're in a barn somewhere, and because I'm in Denver, so they're in a barn somewhere up on the mountains somewhere. I have these wonderful friends that live up, you know, in the mountains, and I couldn't store them any longer.
Stored them for you, yeah.
So there's boxes and boxes of snow domes that have Meryl's name on them, kind of. So, that was how really inspiring she was. You saw what she did, and you wanted to do it. You know, you just said, "Oh my God, this woman!" And I mean, she went on to such amazing work. You know, I mean, the things she's written.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing Substack, but anyway.
Yeah, her Substack is awesome. I'm yes, absolutely. Now, okay, I hate, we've got time still. Don't get me wrong, we still got time. And so the stories that you want to tell, because there's a couple of them that Ian kind of fed me a little bit, and it's like, okay, if there's any stories you want to tell, but you also have an envelope there with some things that you have held on to.
Oh my God! Not only that. Oh, this is my pride and joy. Okay, so. Hang on. I'm a pack rat, but I wish I'd been more of a pack rat. I have Explode-A-Pop. Okay.
Yep.
I have one of those. And then, but this is the most important thing in the world.
There it is. The drink stir.
The drink stir from, you know, they used to do still lifes, right?
Yep.
I don't know how I got either one of these, but then I also am a paper collector, because there was a point, I want to say like 15 years after I left New York, that I started to teach, just do lectures, not teach full time, but do lectures. I was brought into film schools and stuff. My big thing at the time was, because a lot of film schools did not delineate between television and film. And it made me crazy. Like, television is a totally different experience, personality, especially live, of course, or live to tape. So I used to teach these classes that were, this is how you do live TV, and this is how you do film, and they're never the twain shall meet. They're not, you know, process wise, they're different. But I saved a bunch of my paperwork from Letterman. So I have, see this little folder says Letterman. Anyway, but I have, unfortunately, being in New York in the 80s, you had very little space. So I wish I'd collected more. I swear, I mean, I had 5 years of SNL scripts and they're gone. I have just made this. Yeah, I have two. I have Madonna and Chevy Chase. But Dave, this is a script from Dave. Okay, that was particularly fun. It was it was Thursday, July 25th, 1985. So who was the guest on this one? Oh my God. Anyway, we could talk about this later. I'll send you pictures, but it has everything, including it has the, you know, the parts that we would put on cue cards, which were intros and stuff like that. But I also have a ton of, well, not a ton, but quite a few late night rundowns. I love rundowns. They're just so beautiful. They just really kind of, how would you say, they capture the experience, you know. And I have a couple of them that were that were stage managers. And so it's like they're all marked up. See, look, this is like a really good one. See,
Oh, wow. Yeah. Holy
so
smokes.
that's stage manager notes and stuff like that. So
Yep.
I have stuff like this for, SNL and all the other shows. I have the original Carlin at Carnegie script. And
Oh,
I've been
that's
thinking,
cool.
I've been thinking because I typed it by hand from a Walkman. Okay. So
Holy
basically,
smokes.
so I have some crazy paperwork that I'll send you and everything.
Please
And
do,
Ian,
yeah.
send Ian stuff from SNL and all. But I want to tell one story.
Yep.
Okay, so Harvey Picard.
Yep. Oh, yes.
So Harvey, came on during the strike with his shirt on, with the strike shirt that
Yep.
said NBC on strike.
Yep.
So my husband at the time was a manager and was up on 5 and stayed there for like a week. He never came home. Okay. Because of course he was forced to do all the work that the guys who were on strike were out. So out on the strike line, on the picket line, were all our friends. I mean, all our friends worked videotape and editing and everything, and they were all picketing.
Yep.
And then I was stressed out because I had to cross the line to come in and work Letterman.
Yep.
But Harvey Picard wore the shirt, that said New York, NBC on strike, right? Yep. Which I should have brought it out. But anyway, so years later, I'm working at Sundance. Okay.
Yep.
At Sundance, I was in charge of mostly documentaries. So my job was I was in the filmmaker services department, the liaison. So we were liaisons between the festival and the filmmaker. It started in 99 with I was in the 99 class. And, and it was an idea by Nicole Guillaume. She was the festival director, and she realized that the filmmakers were like kind of deer in headlights when they got to the festival. So our job, I always joke, we were kind of the moms, we call them up, we tell them what they were going to do, when they were going to do it. Then we'd follow them around all of their screenings. We go with them. Well, in the midst of, I want to say it might've been 2000 when American Splendor was there. Okay.
Yep.
The film itself, which is, if you have an audience seen American Splendor, you are bereft, because you should be bereft, because it is one of the great all-time sort of, how would you put it? It's sort of a documentary, sort of fiction. It is fiction because Paul Giamatti plays Harvey Picard, right?
Yep.
So I hear about it and someone says to me, Letterman's in there. You should go, So I went to the screening and met the two filmmakers, and I've just had the best time because, of course, there's all these segments from Letterman. But guess what? The segment with Harvey Picard is recreated. So I went up to them and I said, "What's going on? You have all these other segments from Letterman." And they said, NBC would not let us have it because it was so controversial. And so we had to recreate it with Paul Giamatti playing him, see? Yep. And I said, well, I was there, and we joke about that. And, I have the shirt because, of course, I got one of the shirts from one of my, union buddies. And I said, and so it was this really fabulous, like, kind of mix of worlds, right? So when they were going to leave, and I said, don't leave, because I'm hearing, they don't tell us as staff, but I had a feeling. I said, I think you're going to win. They ended up winning for, I think, the best, fiction piece. Just an amazing. So now fast forward to about 2 years ago, and who should come to Series Fest but Paul Giamatti? Okay. And, he has this podcast he does. I forget the name of it. It's really a crazy podcast with like I want to say he's a scientist or something. Do you know about this podcast?
I don't know about Paul Giamatti's podcast. I don't.
No, that's all right.
I'm going to be looking it up after. Later. Yeah.
I should have. So we did the podcast, at the festival. So I came and I wore my shirt, right? And I went up to the mic when he had questions from the audience. And I walked up and I looked at him and I said, "Hi, Paul." And he went, like that shirt? And I said, yeah, I wore it for you because I bet you know about this shirt. And he went, oh my God. And he there was a whole thing, and I might have a copy of it. If I do, I'll send it to you.
Please do. Yeah, we'll put that
me
out.
and him.
Absolutely.
But there he was. And he said, oh my God. He said, yeah, we couldn't show that segment for some reason. NBC legal said no. So I thought that was sort of interesting that NBC let him have all the other segments, right? But not that one, I guess, because of the, strike part of it or whatever. But that was one of my most crazy moments. And this is absolutely, as silly as it seems, my favorite story. So there was a period of time when they kept putting cameras on monkeys. Do you remember this monkey cam?
Yes,
okay.
I remember the monkey. Yes.
Okay. Before
we all remember the late night monkey cam. Absolutely.
Right. So the first monkey was not a big monkey. I don't know monkeys, right? But he wasn't a chimpanzee or anything. He was like a smaller monkey, and he came out, and the camera was so heavy that you just see the picture, and he fell backwards. So the camera, of course, shows this. And I swear to God, I remember Dave going, oh my God, we need a bigger monkey. It was like, these kind of goofy moments that just were incredible to watch, And then, I was there when, the wrestler beat up, what's his name? The guy that went on.
Oh, you're talking about Jerry the King Lawler, a friend of mine.
Yes.
You were there when he punched Andy Kaufman?
Yes.
You were there
my
for that.
God.
Okay,
yes.
So this is great. Let's talk about that. I'll talk about. I love talking to Jerry Mulligan about that. I love talking to all the people who are. Please tell me anything that you want to talk about that moment. That was a crazy moment.
For one thing, we got Andy, which you never know what. See, it was so unreal that I kind of didn't know. Just like with Crispin Glover, he was, because you get into this mode where you almost think, you're not in reality anymore. And that's what happened there. It's like 1 minute, it's a segment, and the next minute you're going, oh my God, I think that guy is like really hurting him, And same thing with, who was it? Belzer. Belzer got, and I was there when that happened.
Wait, are you talking about the moment with Hulk Hogan?
Yeah, no, it was some other. It might
Mr. T, Hulk Hogan and Mr. T when he put him in a.
Yeah.
You were there for that? Holy smokes, that's a crazy moment.
And here's the thing: he fell to the floor and cracked his skull, and blood started coming out.
Yeah, he bought a place, I think, in France, and called it Shea Hogan or something like that because of the lawsuit. Like it was. Oh my God, those are two. Okay,
but you're watching, and here's what I tell people: when I ran camera back in the 80s and the 70s at SNL, right? I mean, at Saturday. South Carolina ETV.
Yes,
I was shooting this South Carolina history program. And it was a reproduction of a scene, like from the, early days, like in the, 1600s.
Yep.
And there was this guy who was sitting next to his son at a table, and I was running camera on him. And he was just supposed to sort of have a little fight with his son.
Yep.
Well, he foams at the mouth and falls backwards. And I follow him to the floor as a camera woman. And watching him, thinking he's acting. Well, guess what? He was having a fit. He was having an epileptic fit. And, to this day, I have moments where if you see on camera or you're near someone, if they have an epileptic, I have like PTSD because I thought he was acting and I wasn't supposed to stop shooting, and then you feel like the idiot that you didn't go, oh my God, this is real. That's kind of the way I felt in those scenarios where you just go, maybe I should be running in and, you just say, okay, it's showbiz, but there's people's lives, here. It was just a very odd feeling, I have to say.
So you probably don't know this, but Jerry Lawler, has gone on to become a gigantic personality within the pro wrestling business. And he was a color commentator on World Wrestling Entertainment's flagship show, Raw. One night during a telecast, he's there and he had a heart attack on they moved the camera away and they moved it around it, but a live show. And Jerry actually, that happened with Jerry actually. I want to say probably 10 years ago.
Well, I worked the first network. It was called Saturday Night Main Event, and I worked all of them.
Yeah, I gotta have you back on for this. Like, are you kidding me?
I worked for Dick Ebersol.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Oh gosh,
that was his baby. That was his baby.
Yeah. Well, oh gosh, my phone's dying. But anyway.
Okay. Okay. We're gonna we have to end it in a second here. Okay. Do you have anything else to say about that moment with Andy and Jerry? Because in the wrestling business they call it a work, that moment was a work, and Dave was in on it.
Oh, really?
But very, very few other people were in on it.
No, I had no idea. I thought I was like, I was scared. Yeah, I mean, I thought again, like I should jump in. It was just a shock, I have to say, in a way, what happened with the Oscars and Chris Rock and
Will Smith,
Will Smith. I'm watching it live and I'm thinking it's a what do you call a work?
It's a work. It's a worked moment.
I thought that's a work. Those two have worked it out between the two of them, right? And I really thought until I want to say at least a couple of minutes in, when you start to see the shock of people.
Yep.
I was like, no, that's them. They, those guys are friends. They worked this out. This is just them kind of, and for at least a day, I was convinced that they would come out and say both of us were just, just making this, an act kind of thing. And then it took like a day before I went because of my experience. See, and, my husband and I are quick to go, oh, that's been planned. We know that, why is the camera already there?
Yeah.
And, so you get that way when you've been around it,
a little jaded almost. It's almost a little jaded. Yeah. And
jaded.
You are preaching to the choir. I am very, very much that guy. I don't believe hardly any of these moments that happen until I have to be convinced, basically, because I've seen so many of these things.
And the only thing worse than entertainment is politics that way.
Well, and
because I worked on 2 different presidential campaigns, and oh my God, behind the scenes. And I'm telling you, it's all set up. It's like I worked for John Kerry, the John Kerry campaign. I worked for the woman who shot all of the Jumbotron pieces, right? Last minute, she just hired me last minute. And I already knew because I held cue cards for Ronald Reagan. Okay. Because one of the things we would do is these sort of remote kind of shoots every now and then. Kevin would say, hey, we're going down to DC and we're gonna, and I'd go with Al, my dear Al, who loved these kind of things.
Yeah.
He loved it. He'd come home and tell his, kids that, I talked to the president, and I was assigned, to Ronald Reagan. And, if you're assigned to the president to do anything, now, clearly they don't have this worked out very well lately, but you get your own Secret Service person, and they're supposed to follow you around and make sure that you're not up to anything or vice versa.
Yeah.
So I had my own Secret Service guy that I became friendly with him. Long story. I got him to do research on my father-in-law, my husband's father, who I'm pretty sure was CIA after World War II.
Whoa.
And if it wasn't for the Iran-Contra affair that then basically closed down all the libraries, I think we would have found out, because he had to call me up and say, Eileen, we can't do any more research because I'll get fired or put in jail.
I need to ask you a question about that, and unfortunately, then we gotta close it up. Unfortunately,
sure, no problem.
No, but I could do this all day, and I can't wait to have your husband on. I can't wait till we continue this. I've got many other questions. I mean, man, you opened up a couple really interesting cans there at the end of things that you've done. You are the cue card girl. Did your Secret Service agent? Did he ask you if you have an arrangement?
No, he didn't.
Okay. No, all right. And for those who want to know what that's about, watch the cue card girl.
That's a great story.
It's a great story. Oh, it hooks you right away.
If it wasn't the truth, and that's the story of my life, is that painful, and my husband as well. We are truthful to almost to a fault. And a lot of times in work, you get to a point and someone goes, well, you're going to have to just lie about this. And both of us would go, no, we're not going to do that. I've done this a number of times. I have great stories about Pet Cemetery too. Anyway, but because I was asked.
You're so good at this, and we did talk about this, and we are going to close it up. But
Okay.
I know that you've always wanted to do a talk show or this kind of stuff. Like, you've always had that in you, and I just encourage you. If the idea of a podcast, I think you have a podcast in you for no outcome other than the enjoyment of the process. I can't tell you how much. Well, I can, because I think you're feeling it too. The time when you and I sat down and started this to right now, as far as I'm concerned, we're outside of time, and we're just having so much fun, and we're in the flow of what this creative conversation brings, and these stories. It is a phenomenal experience, and I feel like you would be really good at it if you decided to do one. So
the joy of my life right now is doing Q&As with filmmakers after their film plays, and doing interviews. And I continue to do that. I did that for 10 years. Well, I did it all through my career in festivals, but I do it at the Denver Film Festival every year. And I do it throughout the year, different times. And I do it at Santa Fe International Film Festival. And it's the greatest joy of my life, because it is what I enjoy, is to be there. And like I said, I realized it's just what cue cards were, which is you're just standing on the side going, hey, let me help you. Let me be here, support you, as you know, because if you love something, you want someone to do well in it.
Absolutely.
And that's what I can sense and see. I've really enjoyed people coming to me like Ian and yourself, because I know you truly love what we do. I would never talk to someone who wants to take people down or hurt their feelings. Or
no.
It's not
too much good to focus on that. There's too much good.
So much good.
There's just too much good.
There's so much good. Yes.
This has been a treat. Eileen O'Brien, thank you so much. I'm certain maybe when hubby's on, we have you both on as well. Maybe you come in at the end or something like that. That would be a neat thing.
Okay.
I want to talk to him about editing stupid pet tricks and whatnot, and some of these other things. You're a treat. I appreciate you so much. The Letterman Podcast has one sponsor only. That is hello-deli.com. Rupert may not own the Hello Deli anymore, but he has hello-deli.com, and he is still the only place that you can get official Late Show with David Letterman merchandise. He's got shirts, he's got mugs, he's got hats.
No.
And Rupert himself is the guy who packs it and sends it out.
Oh my God. Well, look, this is, I've got the one on here. I've got these. These are from those days,
That's
right?
from late night. Yeah.
But this one is one of my favorites. Look at this one. Worldwide Pants.
Oh, there you go. You got a Worldwide Pants one too. Oh, see, I love that.
I love that so
love
much.
that
I
stuff.
never got a jacket because I wasn't considered full time, But Kevin, of course, got the jackets out the yin yang. I should call him up and say,
we'll hit him up for one. Absolutely. Eileen, you're amazing. Thank you so much. This has been another episode of the Letterman Podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.